when you're watching Coraline, this movie stands the test of time. There has never been a movie in like the Halloween kind of like dark, you know what I mean? It kind of fits like the horror genre a little bit. It perfectly fits the mold of whatever you want to call spooky season into one movie, and that is Coraline. It is without a doubt a movie that has continuously over and over and over again. Every time you watch it or you rewatch it, you always find something new to really like about it. You always find like, oh, that was funny because people made a meme about it, or that line was really clever, or I really like the way that they I really like the way that they, the claymation was used. I really like that shot or that scene that they did right there. I like all of these little things about the movie that are so interesting and so new. And the movie never feels dull. It feels very fresh and exciting every single time, especially the longer and longer you let time pass on. And it's also just one of those stories, one of those, and maybe I'm letting nostalgia get the best of me here, but I just feel like since I watched it when I was a kid, I used to think it was just like, that was like the starter. It's kind of like a starter horror movie. Like if you don't like scary movies all that much, but you kind of want to, watch something for the Halloween spirit, and it's also like family friendly, so to speak. Like Coraline fits that mold perfectly. It's a female protagonist. It has everything in there that's perfect for sitting around and watching it as a family. You know what I mean? If that's what you really, really want to do. I don't know how to better describe this movie as like the perfect starter horror movie for kids. It's just a great movie. And I don't know. There's so much about it that's so unique, but it also feels very nostalgic and familiar. It feels very, how can I put it? It has all of the positive attributes of like a kind of like a supernatural kind of a feeling to it. It has like this other world and this other dimension. It has like this other place of escapism for children who maybe are bored or they get tired of their everyday life, right? Like they could just adventure and their imagination takes them to a better place where things are more fun and more exciting, and they have like a better way of living, or so to speak, right? Like that's very relatable for kids and even adults. They don't want to be like the parents in the movie. They want to be, on some level, everybody can relate to Coraline. Everybody can see things from Coraline's perspective. I also think that it does a good job at creeping me out. Like when I was a kid, I thought that the mother was absolutely, I'm talking about the one with the button eyes, not the actual mom, but you know what I mean? Like the mother, I thought she was absolutely terrifying. She creeped me out. I was just like, ugh, the way that she transformed and how she continuously kept on, the way that she kept on evolving or turning into the creature that she actually is. It was very freaky, very, very freaky. And I think they did that very well. And if we're going to talk about this movie, let's talk about it. The starting sequence alone the opening is by itself is amazing. the way that I honestly don't know how they did it. I don't know all the intricacies and all the ins and outs of it. But I will say this. There's something so, it's like, oh my gosh, what are they called? And like in musicals, they have this thing called, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name right now. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I have it. Okay, so at the beginning of like a musical or whatnot, they'll play like a starting piece of music that gives you a little. They'll play certain melodies or themes from different songs that they're going to play throughout the musical. They basically just set up the whole themes and the melodies and the songs that are going to reappear throughout the rest of the music. The overture, is that what it's called? I hope that's what it's called. It's like the overture. So this opening sequence of Coraline is the overture of the entire movie. And by the way that they craft it, the way that they design it, with like the cutting of the eyes, the making of the doll is kind of like, you kind of just already know that like, oh, they're going to do this. This movie's going to be done justice. It's going to be done right. You know what I mean? So there's that. I also just think that in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like I enjoy stories where I enjoy the fact that she has this huge burden and that she puts on Coraline kind of gets her parents in trouble, you know what I mean? And because she gets them in trouble, she's like, okay, I'm going to carry it on my back and on my shoulders to kind of save them. I like those stories where the main character tends to save their family, you know what I mean? Like I like Jimmy Neutron, you know what I mean? You ever see Jimmy Neutron the movie? That's a cool, you know, great movie, you know what I mean? But the story revolves, the main challenge in the movie is that like Jimmy thought that he wanted his life without his parents, but then once they're gone, he's like, all right, I got to get them back because I love them. They're my parents. They mean so much to me, and I'm going to go and save them. And this movie that follows the same thing. I just like those stories where it's like, it's about saving your family, saving the people that you take for granted on a day-to-day basis. Because you just get so used to it, right? Like, I know that there are people out there whose parents are like celebrities or whatever, right? And I always think to myself like, man, I would never, you know what I mean? If they were my parents or blah, 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 like if this person was my parent or vice versa, you know what I mean? If I was their kid or whatever, I would be like, I wouldn't take them for granted. I'd be like so grateful for them and be all of this and that, right? But then I have to take into account that it's like, well, they're just their kid, right? Like they don't know anything else. Like it's one thing for me outside of that life to be like, I would, you know, treat them like X, Y, and Z, or I would be like this sort of a thing. But in actuality, it's like you just get used to it. You know, it's like anything else. You just, you get used to it. You do on a certain level do take it for granted. But anyways, my point is, in this movie, she has taken for granted the life that her family has made for themselves. You know what I mean? The life that may seem boring, or the life that may seem like, oh, it's just a any other regular day or a life where Coraline is constantly bored and she doesn't have anybody to play with. She doesn't have her parents to talk to. She's kind of just on her own, right? And we think that because we're on our own for some of the time, we think that's the only way that we could get along just fine without them. But that's not the truth. And I really like it that she goes out there and she fights for them. She puts herself to the test for them and is willing to do whatever it takes to get them back, to find them. And I also just enjoy the the characters in the movie. I think they're, eccentric. They're a little bit out there, obviously, but overall, I think that they add to the aesthetic of the kind of the darkness of the town, of the place that she lives. You know what I mean? They add a certain uniqueness, if that's the word you want to use. But when I was watching the movie, I was kind of just, I don't know, I felt this sort of connection to it in a way that feels like, well, what's the right word? I think it was like a connection of, you know how sometimes there are those people who are strange and unique, or they have like a certain vibe about them that you can just tell that it's like, okay, I'm not really going to get along with this person, or like because we live near each other, we have to like get along, sort of kind of a thing. Well, that's kind of how I felt with this one. It was just like, there's the guy who's the gymnast, and then there's the old ladies, and there's all this, all of these adults, all these other people that you like just don't really know, and sometimes you just make stuff up in your head about who they are and what they do and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I felt about it. Was, I don't know. I was kind of looking at it from the lens of like, I'm a kid, I don't know these people, I think they're weird. So I was looking at it from like, well, maybe that's why Coraline sees them as so weird or eccentric, or they come across as kind of like different, But it's actually, they could just be regular people, and they end up being so. But they have those little eccentric quirks in their personality that, add to the movie, their character, and it makes the story a little bit more interesting. But anyways, I also I really like the, I don't want to say dilemma. I just like the competition aspect. I like the game that they play between the mother and Coraline. I like the way that they challenge one another. And I like the way that when Coraline finds out that, or, she kind of just learns, what's it called? She says, no, she finds those ghost kids. That's what it is. She finds those ghost kids, and they kind of just tell her like, okay, so you can find our eyes throughout this whole place by using this or doing whatever you need to do. And then she does eventually find their eyes, but they go like, hey, listen, even if you win, she'll never let you go. Like, you're still gonna get trapped in here. I really, obviously the deception's there. It's always been there. But I just like the direness of it. I enjoy the even the game, you could play the game fair. It's never going to be fair. There's no way you're going to win. And it just feels like a lot like real life, you know what I mean? It's like you play the game fair, you play the game as best as you can, and then it turns out, you turn around and you look at things how they are, and you realize that it's kind of like it's kind of like a cheated system. You're never gonna win, you know what I mean? You're never gonna get on top. You're never gonna pull through in the end. Of course, in this case, Coraline does, but I'm just saying that's how it feels sometimes. Or, there's the double cross, right? Even if you win, she's never gonna let you go. And I just remember that feeling of, I don't want to say despair, but just that moment of like, oh, snap, like I played the game fairsies and squaresies, but they're never going to let me get through, right? It's like they keep on moving the finish line further and further and further, and they just go like, just run another mile and then another mile. No. Just one more mile, and you're like so tired, you're running out of breath, and you don't know how much further you can run, walk, crawl, how much further you can keep on moving forward until eventually they say like, all right, you finished the race. Like, there is none of that. So anyways, I thought that was a great part of it. I also like the way that they set this whole thing up, right? It makes it feel uneasy, but it feels peaceful and quiet and nice, right? Like when we first meet her alternative mother and father and friends, it's all sweet. It is very nice. It's very enticing. It's very different. It's very new. It feels good to be a part of something that's like loving and different and beginning. You know what I'm saying? A new relationship is born. But then slowly over time, right, you begin to notice the cracks. You get to see the little changes that you weren't paying attention to, and you see that life in this whole new environment isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and you kind of miss what you used to have, You kind of miss the boring and repetitive nature of everyday life just because, you've gotten comfortable with it because you've gotten used to it, and this new world, this new life has been set up to be amazing, but it's actually just a complete lie. It's a bit of a fabrication of what is actually out there. So I think the way that they talk about or they speak about the deception, the way that they pull on the naivete, is that the right word? They pull Coraline easily. They reel her in easily because she's so young, because she's a kid, right? And that's why it makes it the perfect story for a kid's movie, or for Coraline, for the protagonist to be a kid, is because they're naive. They want adventure. They want fun. They want all of these good things, right? So it's easy to pull them in. It's easy to get them on the hook than, say, an adult. You know what I mean? That's why she's only able to entice children, So she's reeling in Coraline, right? Shows her a fancy dinner, a happy life, a mother who's attentive, who cares about her, who's constantly talking to her, asking about her life, figuring her out, trying to be there for her. She has friends and like a whole gathering. It feels fun. It feels exciting. It feels new, you know? And that's something that I think we can all understand or quote unquote relate to. But like I said, eventually it'll all crumble down. So now, what does this all mean? What are we really getting at here? What does it matter when you watch Coraline? What do you really want to get from it? And I think what I get from the movie is an appreciation. I have this understanding that what looks good isn't what always feels good, you know? And I completely get a wake-up call, so to speak. I get this feeling of, okay, this is how things are supposed to be. This is the way that things feel better when you know that they're real, you know? She knows that her mom and her dad are really themselves because they're boring. You know, they're not this made-up fabrication. They're not these puppets, you know, being pulled by this master puppeteer, you know? They're uniquely themselves, and they're boring, but they are them. And they're also very loving, and they're also very kind, and they're also very good to Coraline. Whereas the other family, you know, the pretend family, are faking it till they make it. And because they're faking it, they want to keep her in this dream world. They want to keep her closer to Mother so that way she can get what she wants. And that's the harsh thing. That's the messed up thing. Is that they're all serving her for what she wants and not caring about how they feel or what they truly want. You know what I mean? So now, the mother. She is, in my opinion, she's one of those antagonists in horror movies that are simple, but when done well, I mean, they just completely wash every other horror antagonist out there. Like, you can talk about the Scream movies, you can talk about Friday the 13th, you can talk about Halloween, you can talk about all of the big Nightmare on Elm Street, like all of the villains, all the classic Halloween horror villains that you can think of, and you can be like, yeah, they're scary, but when I think about like simplicity at its best of like evil or deceptive or trickery, I think about the mother from Coraline, because she does it the best. I can't, there's nobody else that I know that does horror so simple and so easily, but at the same time so, I don't know. She just has that ease about her, you know? She has that ability to switch from totally kind and totally beautiful and pure and good, and then she twists and turns, and it's like oh my gosh, have you ever seen those nature Oh my gosh. So, you know how like those predators will have something to like make them seem kind or make them seem kind of like, I don't know, what's the right word? I guess less scary or whatever. My point being that she reminds me of like a gentle flower, but then she turns out to be one of those poisonous plants or one of those like carnivorous plants, that those Venus flytraps that eats flies or insects and stuff like that, right? Like you think it's just a harmless little plant, but then it turns out to be a lot more sinister. There's a lot more under the surface there. You know what I mean? So there's so many layers to go through with Coraline, and there's definitely a lot of better like analysis videos out there that do it better justice than I'm doing right now talking about it. But if you've ever seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that down to the tiniest movement, down to the tiniest, claymation, stop motion, down to the smallest artistic drop that they of juice, that the creativity juice that they squeezed into this movie, they squeezed it down to its last drop. And I am grateful that they have never done any kind of live action adaptation or sequel to this, because I just know it wouldn't be, I mean, never say never, obviously there are, in this day and age, it's like all they do are sequels and all they do are unoriginal stuff. And that's not to say that a sequel would never be good, but it's just a matter of like, I think of Coraline as so untouchable or so good on its own that you don't really need to do anything else. Like, it's already Coraline is a full course meal. It's already there, okay? To do a second course meal or to do like you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to serve another dish at the dinner, right? It has to be just as good, if not better than what you first served. So, think of Coraline as like, let's say like, think of Coraline as like a delicious steak with like, other sides or whatnot, right? Now, you're going to tell me that you're going to try to serve a second course, right? You're going to try to serve like another, let's say like a chicken next, right? Now, chicken is really good, but the steak by itself, that's enough. That's enough for the meal, okay? So the sequel or the live action adaptation or whatever, you have to think of it as like them trying to follow it up. And you don't need any of that. You don't need any of that. All you already made it. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's best to just move forward and try to make something, a separate dish, another meal for another day. Don't try to repeat or try to continue the dinner, end the dinner, and then start a new one. You know what I mean? Do your own thing afterwards. I don't know. I don't think I'm making any sense there, but when you're watching Coraline, keep in mind that this is one of those movies that you can watch with your kids, you can watch with your friends, you can watch at any time during spooky season or any time during, like, I guess, a rainy day. You know what I mean? I do want to say that it is kind of like for me at least, it's a seasonal movie. I tend to only watch it during October when it gets like spooky season. You know what I'm saying? And I feel that way about most horror movies. You know what I mean? I tend to watch it only during October. But they're seasonal. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, of course, Coraline you can watch any time of the year. But for me, I tend to watch it during the fall. I tend to watch it during spooky season. And it just the way that it is. Okay, but it's one of those. It's a classic. For me, at least, it's kind of a classic for me. It's something that just feels so right, and they do such a great job at it that at this point, it's nostalgia, it's classic, it's fresh and new, and it just feels so distinct and unique and very. It's one of those movies that you just constantly hold in the back of your mind and like, oh yeah, Coraline, top tier movie. You know what I mean? I don't know. But anyways, when you're watching Coraline, put yourself into her shoes, into her boots or whatever, and think to yourself, how would I do in this scenario? You know what I mean? Don't think to yourself like, oh, she's just a kid and I would just beat up the mother. It's like, no. Put yourself in her shoes and be real. Would you be able to overcome certain things? And if the answer is yes, then cool, super great. If the answer is no, then you really need to get the gears turning in your brain and be like, okay, how can I overcome this challenge? You know what I'm saying? But Coraline is a great movie, great spooky season movie, and if you're going to watch something this spooky season, I definitely recommend Coraline. It's top tier. So, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.